Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. It's Samuel Allred on the mic, and today we're going to talk about the only 5 guns you need for hunting. If you have these 5 guns, you're set for almost any hunting scenario, and even beyond hunting. Now, I'm not against having more than 5 guns, far from it. But if you're new to hunting and shooting, or you're just on a budget, these are the guns that I would recommend, and you'll get a lot of mileage out of them. Speaking of guns, I recently sawed off a shotgun for the first time. This shotgun has kind of an interesting story behind it. It was my first gun. It was a 20 gauge single shot Winchester 37 that was built in the 1930s, I believe. My dad gave it to me when I was younger, maybe 15 or 16. And like I said, it was my first gun. I'm generally not into modifying heirlooms like this, but we had already ruined the gun, so I wasn't shooting it. What happened was I got this gun as a gift and I wanted to hunt ducks with it. Now, it's a really old model of shotgun. And sometimes with these older models, they are not built in a way that can accommodate steel shot. Back in the day, you could use lead shot for waterfowl, but then lots of ducks were having problems ingesting this lead and killing them. So many states, if not all states, have gone to non-toxic shot only for waterfowl, including Washington, where I lived at the time. So in order to hunt ducks, we had to shoot steel shot. Someone had warned us, though, that if we shot steel, it could damage the barrel. We wanted to go hunting. We didn't really have enough guns for me and my brothers and my dad. And so we decided to just go ahead and shoot steel out of it anyway. Well, sure enough, we shoot steel. And after a while, at the end of the barrel, there's this little bulge. I think they call it ringing the barrel. There's this little bulge along the cylinder at the end of the barrel where the steel, I guess, couldn't fit through the built-in fixed choke. And it actually widened the diameter of the barrel right at the end. And it popped the bead off the barrel. So I had this gun, and at some point I realized, okay, now this gun is not only going to probably shoot a poor pattern, it's actually going to be dangerous to shoot. So I had it sitting in my closet for a couple of years, and I kept thinking someday I'm going to bring it to a gunsmith, have them cut it off at a better length where it takes care of the problem at the very end of the barrel, have them put a new bead on it, something like that. Well, years go by and I've never really shot this gun, and I just don't really want to spend the money to bring it to a gunsmith. It is a nice gun, but it's scratched up, it's dinged up. We got it used secondhand. But I also don't want to just throw it away because it was a gift and it kind of has some sentimental value as my first gun. So finally, over the holidays, I was at my parents' house and I brought the gun and I thought, I'm just going to take a hacksaw and cut this off. So I grabbed a square that my dad had and tried to mark it off as well as I could and took a hacksaw to it and just did the best I could to cut it square. Cut it off. It came off really easy. It was surprisingly easy with a hacksaw. And then I used a file to file it out. And again, kind of just eyeballing it, trying to make it as square as possible. So now I have a sawed off shotgun. It went from maybe a 28-inch barrel to a 26-inch barrel. And it doesn't look bad. You might notice if you're looking closely, but it doesn't look bad. I'm sure it swings differently, but I'm excited to take it out and try to shoot a snowshoe hare or a grouse or something with it. I think it's going to be super fun. I've enjoyed small game hunting with a shotgun, but truthfully, especially when you're just hiking for a long time looking for small game, it is nicer to have something a little lighter and with a smaller load that's perfect for grouse and things where you might really tear up a lot of meat with a bigger load. So I'm curious to see what the pattern's like. I'll probably try and pattern it before I go out and hunt with it. but I'll keep you updated and let you know if there's any more developments. I just thought that was an interesting little story to lead in to what we're talking about today. Before we get into it, if you enjoy this podcast, please help me out and give it a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. It will help the show grow and in turn, help more people get outdoors and into hunting, which is the goal of this podcast, the mission. So I really appreciate those good ratings and follows. All right, let's get into our topic for today. The only 5 guns you need for hunting. We're going to start by talking about shotguns. A fun hypothetical that people talk about is this idea of a one-gun hunter. And while there's lots of guns and calibers that are thrown around, in the US, if you want to hunt legally, there's only one practical choice, and that's a shotgun. People like to talk about the .22 long rifle as the best survival cartridge, and that might be true. You could make an argument for that. But in the US, if you want to hunt as many modern firearm seasons as you possibly can, the only gun for you is a shotgun. That's because with a shotgun, you can hunt small game, mid-sized game, big game, just by changing the type of load. So for small game, you might hunt squirrels with 4-size lead shot. You might hunt turkeys with 4-size or 5 or 6 lead with a bit more of a magnum load. For ducks, you might use number 2 steel shot, something like that. And if you want to hunt big game, all you have to do is choose a different load. You're probably going to use a slug. So with a slug is just like, it's more like a bullet. It's a 3/4 ounce or ounce size, almost gauge diameter piece of lead. And it's shaped a little bit more like a bullet. And it's loaded into a shot shell. And you can shoot it out of your shotgun. And it will give you a decent trajectory out to 50 or 100 yards. So if you want to hunt deer, even bears, even elk, if it's legal to do so, you can be effective out to 100 yards or so with a slug. And it really is a big piece of lead that you're slinging down range at that animal. To find your effective range with a slug, you are going to have to go out and shoot some out of your shotgun and kind of determine your group size, your trajectory, your velocity and energy, things like that. Some of that you can find on the back of the box. Some of that you are going to have to go shoot and test to see what sort of accuracy you're getting. The difference between a slug and a rifle bullet, for example, is that the slug is just going to lose velocity a lot quicker than a rifle bullet. And you may not be shooting it from a rifled barrel, which helps to stabilize the projectile and improve accuracy. But with a slug, you can have an effective range that is as good or better than the range of a bow. There's lots of people out there who hunt with bows. I wouldn't recommend buckshot for big game, generally speaking. It may have its applications, but you'll likely be better off with a slug. If you're new to shotguns, the gauge number can be a little bit confusing. The larger the number, the smaller the diameter of the bore. That's because gauge is measured by the number of lead balls of equal size to the bore's diameter that it takes to make 1 pound. It's kind of confusing. I think it's kind of archaic as well. But for example, it would take 12 lead balls with the diameter of a 12 gauge shotgun bore to equal 1 pound. On the other hand, for a 20 gauge shotgun, it would take 20 lead balls with the diameter of the 20 gauge shotgun bore to equal 1 pound. It's easier just to remember that the bigger the number, the smaller the diameter. There's 2 shotgun gauges that are more popular than any others, the 12 and the 20 gauge. And if you want to be able to shoot your shotgun a lot and be able to afford ammo, I would suggest that you choose a 12 or 20 gauge if you're just starting out. Honestly, they do pretty much the same thing, but a 12 gauge is going to have a little bit more of an effective range, or a further effective range, because the larger diameter of the bore and of the shot shell allows you to put more shot into that load and increases your pattern density as the shot leaves the barrel of the shotgun and speeds down range. The 20 gauge is going to have less shot, and the advantage of a 20 gauge is that it has less recoil as well. A 12 gauge can be uncomfortable to shoot, especially if the gun doesn't fit you well. A 20 gauge will be much more pleasant to shoot, but it does have a slightly less effective range just because you have less shot in each shot shell. You're really not getting much of a difference in the speed at which the shot exits the barrel of the shotgun. It's really about that shot pattern density. You can do almost everything you want to with a 12 or 20 gauge. It's not going to make or break your hunt. I would choose your gauge for either whatever you like the most or for your 80-20 scenario. If 80% of your hunting is going to be waterfowl hunting, where you might be shooting those larger size shots like number 2 shot or BB shot, then it might be helpful to have that 12 gauge so that you can have more shot and a better pattern downrange on those big-bodied birds. On the other hand, if you're mostly going to be using your shotgun to shoot slugs, you might choose a 20 gauge because it will be a little bit more pleasant to shoot. You still get plenty of power downrange with a 20 gauge slug. And then you can use your 20 gauge shotgun to hunt squirrels or ducks or anything else when you're not hunting with slugs. So just think about what you like and think about what you will be hunting the most and really just take your pick. I don't think it's going to make or break your hunt either way. Another thing to think about when choosing a 12 or 20 gauge shotgun is how heavy the gun will be. A 20 gauge shotgun is likely to be lighter just because it has a smaller barrel in action than a 12 gauge shotgun. And so it may be nicer to walk around with if you need to carry it long distances. Say you're hunting upland game. Now, those lighter guns can kick more sometimes, so that's the one thing to watch out for. But generally speaking, a 12 gauge is going to have stouter recoil than a 20 gauge shotgun. If you are hoping to hunt with your shotgun for small game and large game with slugs, make sure to check your state's regulations. I know that some states will only allow you to hunt big game with a 12 gauge shotgun, if that's what you're hoping to do. So if you are in a state where you want to hunt ducks or squirrels with shot, and then you want to hunt deer or bears or something with slugs, and you can only use a 12 gauge, that's going to be your better choice. By the way, if you're new to hunting regulations, check out episode 16, A Beginner's Guide to Hunting Regulations. In that episode, I walk through everything you need to know to narrow down the regulations for the species and unit that you're hunting in so that you can hit the field confident that you're hunting legally. If you're looking to buy your first shotgun or just a workhorse shotgun, I would recommend a pump action. They're easy to use. They're relatively simple. They give you a few shots. They're not going to be too expensive. Some good models that almost everybody has heard of and may have used are the Remington 870 and the Mossberg 500. These are just the everyday working man's shotgun, and you really can't go wrong with them. You can get both of them for less than $500 at Bass Pro. Just checked online. So if you need just a shotgun that's going to do everything you want it to do, a Remington 870 or a Mossberg 500 is a great choice. Another point for the shotgun's versatility is that you can use it as a home defense tool. It's pretty easy to use, especially a pump action shotgun. It's relatively inexpensive. And if you really wanted to, you could also get a shorter barrel that would make it easier to handle in a closer environment like a home. So they do make formidable home defense tools if that's something you are also interested in. Overall, if you want to open yourself up to the most hunting possibilities with the least investment in your firearm, a shotgun is the way to go. As practical as shotguns are, though, they do have a major limitation, and that's their effective range. For big game hunters, soon you'll find you're wanting something that can reach out a little further, even out to 300 yards or so. This is where your mid to large caliber center fire rifle comes in. The advantages of a rifle over a shotgun are that you have more precision. Rifles are just generally going to shoot better groups than shotguns will, just by nature of the rifled barrel and the aerodynamically designed bullets. Another advantage is that you have more ammunition options and availability for big game hunting. When you're choosing a rifle for big game, especially if it's your first rifle, I would recommend that you choose something in the mid caliber range. What I mean by that is something as small as a .243 or 6mm. Those are the same measurement. By the way, the .243 is the imperial measurement, while the 6mm is the metric measurement. So something as small as a .243 or 6mm, maybe up to something like a .30 caliber. That's a good range to be in for most of your big game hunting rifles. And the reason why I wouldn't go any smaller than a .243 or 6mm is that many states designate that caliber as the smallest that you can use for big game hunting. There's lots of debate over whether you can go smaller and have consistent kills, or whether you really need a .30 caliber or something like a 7mm, something a little bit bigger. But likely in your state, you'll need to use something at least the size of a .243 for deer hunting. Now, check your regs, but that .243 to .30 caliber range is going to be extremely versatile and will likely be good for almost all North American big game hunting, just depending on the cartridge. When selecting a specific cartridge, there's so many to choose from, right? You have your .243, you have your 6.5 Creedmoor, 30-06, 7 PRC, .270 Winchester. The list goes on and on. So I'm not going to tell you what to choose, but I will give you some questions that you might think about when finding a gun to fit this niche in your arsenal. So when you're choosing a cartridge, I would ask, what's the biggest game animal that you intend to chase? If you know that the biggest game animal you are going to shoot normally is a white-tailed deer, you might choose a different cartridge than if the biggest game animal is an elk or moose or something like that. The next question I would ask are, what are the cartridge restrictions in your state? Like we said, sometimes that .243 or 6mm is the minimum caliber size that you can use for big game. Some states also have cartridge restrictions where you can't have a bottleneck cartridge. You have to have a straight wall cartridge. So you need to make sure that your cartridge that you're using is compliant for your local rules and regulations. The next question I would ask is, how much do you want to spend on ammo? Generally speaking, more popular cartridges like the 6.5 Creedmoor or the 308 Winchester are going to be cheaper than less popular cartridges or new cartridges. Also, Magnum cartridges are going to be more expensive, generally speaking, than non-Magnum cartridges. So you just want to think about how much you're willing to spend on ammo. Another question is, how much recoil can you handle? The Magnum cartridges may be uncomfortable to shoot, and it takes some training to actually be able to shoot them without flinching and shoot them well. Of course, the advantage of having more powder behind the bullet is that you can have flatter trajectories and shoot heavier, longer bullets that have better aerodynamics, so they will drift less in the wind and they'll retain their energy at distance. So you just want to think about how much recoil you can handle, maybe what you've shot before, what you've tried, and make a good decision for yourself. Another question to ask is, are you going to spend money on a rangefinder? We're in a very interesting time where we now have handheld rangefinders that can give you a range almost immediately. You just throw it up, look at where the animal is, and you know how far the animal is away from you. So, whereas in the past, it was a huge advantage to have a rifle that shot with a flatter trajectory, meaning the bullet drops less over 300 yards or 400 or however you're shooting. Today, with a rangefinder, if you have a dialing scope, you can know exactly where that animal is. Say it's 350 yards, and you can dial the elevation so that all you have to do now is just put your crosshair on the animal, steady yourself, make sure the wind is doing what you need it to do, and pull the trigger. It makes it a lot easier than trying to judge the distance of the animal without a rangefinder, where you're thinking, okay, the animal's at 300 yards. Well, it was actually 200 yards and you miss way high. So all of those questions are things I would think about when you're choosing your cartridge. And like I said, if you can get a rangefinder and a dialing scope, the trajectory of your bullet may be less important than it used to be. And you might find that gives you more options. For my rifle in this category, I chose a 30-06. If you want to learn more about the 30-06 cartridge and why I chose it, check out episode number 7 titled The 30-06 for Your First Big Game Rifle, and I talk all about it. If you're looking for a workhorse rifle that's simple and easy to use, it's hard to go wrong with a bolt action rifle. They tend to be more precise than other rifle setups. They are simple, like I said, and bolt action rifles are probably the most popular type of hunting rifle. So there's just so many great options out there. If you are looking for a budget rifle or sort of a mid-range rifle that is going to shoot well and do the job but not break the bank, you might look for a Ruger American rifle. They are inexpensive, but they have a pretty good reputation. Stepping up, you could look for a Weatherby Vanguard or a Bergara B14 rifle. I have a Bergara B14 Hunter rifle. It shoots very well. Bergara is known for quality barrels. And another rifle that many people love is the Tikka T3X. If you're getting a rifle to be your workhorse rifle, I would recommend that you get a synthetic stock instead of a wood stock. Wood is beautiful and there's something classic about it, but it can warp and change shape with humidity or heat or things like that. And your synthetic stock is just going to be a little bit more durable, and you're not going to be afraid to walk through brush with it or scratch it up or something like that. One thing that I would pay for if you have the money is a Cerakote finish on the barrel in action. My rifle has a Cerakote finish and it's been incredible. I can go hunt in the rain and all I have to do is wipe off the rifle and wipe out the bore and it's good to go. It doesn't rust. The Cerakote finish is also super hard. It's a ceramic finish that they can put on metal. It's super hard and I don't have to worry about scratching the barrel as much. So I think the Cerakote finish has been completely worth it, and I would recommend it to you if you have the cash. My last tip before we move on is if you can, get something with a threaded barrel. Hunters more and more are using suppressed rifles, and I think that's a great thing. Suppression makes it so that you don't have to worry as much about your hearing protection, makes it more pleasant. It helps tame the recoil of your rifle. Right now, it is still hard to get suppressors, and you have to pay a $200 tax whenever you buy a suppressor, which is not fun at all. But I think in the future, it will only get easier to get suppressors. And I think that's the direction that hunting is moving in generally. So if you want a rifle that you can use for years and years and be able to shoot suppressed in the future, even if you can't pay for a suppressor right now or you don't want to right now, I think it would be nice to have a threaded barrel. All that being said, if you're not into bolt action rifles or you really want a wood stocked rifle, something like that, get something you like. There's so many good options out there. They are most likely going to serve you well. And it's more important that you have something you enjoy and you will go out and hunt with than the specific rifle that you choose. So we're doing good, right? Now you have the capability to hunt almost any firearm season with your shotgun, and you can stretch it out on big game with your centerfire rifle. But what if you want to hunt small game or varmints beyond the effective range of your shotgun? Or what if you just want a lighter recoiling cartridge to practice with? This is where your AR-15 chambered in 5.56 or 223 comes in. If you're unfamiliar, 5.56 and 223 have the same dimensions, kind of like how we were talking about the 243 and the 6mm. The 5.56 is just the millimeter measurement. So 5.56 millimeters, we say 5.56, and the 223 is the measurement in inches, 0.223 inches. 5.56 is a military round, and it creates higher pressures when fired than the 223 round. So if you have a rifle chambered in 5.56, it's okay to shoot 223 ammo out of it, but not the other way around. So just be careful with that. That said, with this cartridge, 5.56 or 223, you can hunt all sorts of animals, and it's good for smaller animals like coyotes, bobcats, foxes, woodchucks, prairie dogs, smaller hogs, maybe even antelope and deer, if legal in your state. So it fills a nice niche for those small to medium-sized animals. Now, of course, there's different rifles and rifle platforms that you could choose for your smaller caliber centerfire rifle. You don't have to get an AR, but these are the reasons why I would choose an AR chambered in 5.56 or 223. First of all, the AR is a semi-automatic platform, and that will let you take fast follow-up shots on fast-moving game. So if you think about hunting coyotes, they're never staying still. They're always running around. If you miss your first shot, you can immediately have a chance to take another shot with that semi-automatic platform. ARs are also super modular and easy to customize. You can find ways to mount them to a tripod. You could add infrared lights and optics if it's legal in the place that you hunt. You could resize the AR so that it fits you better. And a big one for me is that your AR can double as a battle rifle if you're interested in the tactical side of things, or at least you'll get familiar with the platform. So there's all sorts of cool things that you can do with an AR, and ARs shooting small cartridges tend to be very comfortable to shoot. So if you just want something that you can shoot a lot, they're a great option, and there's plenty of inexpensive ammo you can find in 5.56 or 223. Now, truth be told, I don't own an AR yet, but I would like to, and I really think it will fit a good niche in my arsenal. Because I'm newer to ARs myself, I don't really have any great recommendations for choosing one. I just haven't used them enough. But if you are looking for an entry-level AR, I've heard and read really great things about Palmetto State Armory, so you might check them out if you're in the market. If you've stuck with me this far, you may have noticed a conspicuous omission from the list, and that's the .22 long rifle. The .22 long rifle cartridge is one of the most popular cartridges around the world, and it fills a nice space in our arsenal, a smaller caliber rimfire cartridge. A lot of people will remember the .22 as their first rifle, and it really is the king of plinking cartridges. It's low cost. You can get 100 rounds for $12, even less if you buy bulk. It has low, almost not even noticeable recoil, and you can get lightweight, handy guns that are just easy to carry and fun to shoot. The .22 long rifle is a great cartridge for introducing others to shooting because it's not that scary. It's very easy to be accurate within reasonable ranges with, and it can just be a lot of fun, and you can shoot a lot of it without breaking the bank. The .22 is also great for small game hunting. You can hunt raccoons, you can hunt foxes and bobcats, rabbits, snowshoe hares, squirrels, all these smaller game animals that it's legal to hunt with a rifle, you can use a .22 for. I really like my .22 because it's quieter than my other guns. I can bring it along during a big game hunt and shoot at small game without busting out everything in the area. I don't have to worry as much about ear protection. I still wear ear protection, but it doesn't have to be a perfect fit or something like that. It's not going to totally blast my eardrums. And with a .22, instead of a shotgun, I can shoot animals in the head, and that makes cleaning the animal a lot easier. So let's talk about a .22 versus a shotgun for small game for a minute. You are going to be able to hunt at similar ranges with a .22 and a shotgun. Anywhere within 40 yards, maybe a little further with a .22, just depending on your setup, if you have a scope, things like that. Oftentimes, you will have less damage to the meat with a .22 because, again, on that small game animal, you might take a headshot, and that way you're not rupturing any guts the way that sometimes a shotgun does. With a shotgun, if a pellet gets through the guts or something like that, you can have a bit of a mess on your hands. I found it's not usually as big of a deal with birds, but with small animals like squirrels, it can be kind of a pain after shooting a squirrel and really damaging it with a shotgun. .22s are also way more quiet and more fun to shoot than shotguns. Well, maybe not more fun, but easier, maybe more pleasant to shoot in general just because they're not loud. You have cheaper ammo, and I find hunting with a .22, the marksmanship aspect of it is very fun, and in some ways it's a little bit more rewarding, especially for a game that might be standing still or that you shoot on the ground. If you're looking for a .22 to hunt with, you really don't need to spend lots of cash. You could probably find one at any given pawn shop or used gun selection at Cabela's. They're just so ubiquitous and there's so many of them out there, and likely it will do what you need. If you want to buy a new .22 though, you can't go wrong with a Ruger 10/22. This is a semi-automatic option with a 10-round magazine, and it's just a great setup for small game hunting. They're relatively affordable. Again, if you buy used, it's going to be more affordable, and they're known to be very reliable. I myself have a bolt-action single-shot .22. It is not the most efficient or quick to reload, but it's so much fun. It's very accurate. So I recommend anybody out there who just wants to shoot for fun or wants a fun way to hunt small game, go and get yourself a .22. The last gun that no arsenal would be complete without is, of course, a handgun. The most common use for handguns in hunting scenarios is for bear or predator defense, though some people actually use them as their primary weapon as well. I don't really get the appeal of handgun hunting. Maybe I will in the future, but I'm going to focus on the defensive side of handgun use. If you're new to handguns or you're buying your first handgun, I would recommend that you get a handgun chambered in 9mm. Here's why. 9mm is the most popular handgun round, which means that there will be all sorts of ammo that you can find for it, and you can find it for a pretty good price. Handguns have different mechanics and I think are harder to master than rifles. So it's important that you actually go out and shoot what you are carrying. So you need something that you can shoot often, and it's pretty well accepted that most people can handle a 9mm handgun. Especially if you're getting a handgun for defense when you're hunting, you might look for a handgun that is super small because you think smaller is better, it's easier to carry around, I'm saving weight. I don't recommend this. Try and strike a balance between the size of your handgun and what you're willing to carry. Larger handguns are going to be easier to shoot as a general rule. And especially if you're learning, you want to have a good experience learning and you want to build good mechanics. So if you can, go for a larger handgun. A lot of instructors will recommend a full-size handgun. I personally don't carry a full-size handgun. I have a Glock 48, which is a slimmer version of the Glock 19, essentially. A Glock 19 is a semi-automatic compact handgun that a lot of people like. I would just recommend don't get the smallest gun you can find because it can be very hard to shoot and shoot accurately. And that's the other point for choosing a 9mm round. 9mm may not be the most powerful or best round for bear defense. And it's true, when we're thinking about bear defense, we're thinking about grizzly bears, maybe black bears, right? But especially grizzlies. And you think, I need the biggest round possible for such a big bear. My philosophy, though, is that if you can't hit your target, it doesn't matter how big your round is. If you're toting a small handgun with a Magnum cartridge, you may feel powerful, but if you can't hit the target, that charging bear, it really doesn't matter what cartridge you're loaded with. So again, I would recommend get something that you can shoot a lot, get something that you can practice with. For most people, that's going to be a 9mm. And if you can hit a bear with a couple rounds from a 9mm, that's better than missing a bear with a .357 Magnum. The type of handgun you choose is really up to you. Some people like the mechanical simplicity and reliability of a revolver. Other people like the functionality of a semi-automatic handgun and usually the larger capacity as well. There's lots of good handguns out there that are going to perform well consistently. One thing I would say, though, is to get a good holster. One of the best ways to keep a handgun safe and secure is to get a holster that covers the trigger guard. Some of the best holsters are made out of Kydex. It's this moldable hard plastic material, and you can put your gun into the Kydex holster and it will retain it there. So even if you ran or something, it wouldn't bounce out. You really have to pull to get the gun out of the holster. And while the gun is in the holster, that trigger is covered in the hard plastic shell. Having that trigger covered is important because usually we carry handguns loaded. If we want to be able to face a charging bear in a moment's notice, that gun needs to be loaded and we need to be able to access it quickly. So find a good holster, find something that will cover that trigger guard, find something that will retain your handgun well, and then practice with different places to carry it on your body so that you do have it accessible in that worst case scenario. The handgun that I carry for bear defense is the same one that I carry for people defense. It's what I can afford right now, and I figure that the handgun that I practice with is the best option in a bad scenario and probably a better tool than any handgun that I don't practice with. So those are the 5 guns that will do just about anything you need them to do in the field. And some of them cross over into more tactical, personal defense scenarios as well. There's maybe a few gaps in there if you're looking to get really specialized, but for the most part, if you have a reliable gun in each of those categories, you'll be set. I think there's a few good takeaways from this subject. First, there's probably lots you can do with the gun you have. Like we talked about with shotguns, if you have a capable shotgun, there are plenty of hunting opportunities available to you. Or with a .22 long rifle, you could hunt small game all season long. I sometimes fall victim to thinking where I limit myself because I don't feel like I have the right equipment or don't have the budget to do something. Don't do that. Figure out what you can do with what you've got and get out and hunt. It's always worth it to be outside, and most types of hunting are super fun. Another takeaway is that you probably don't need as many guns as you might think. It's just good to realize this before you start trying to justify buying new guns from a practicality standpoint. There's nothing wrong with having more than 5 guns, right? I want to have more than 5 guns, but it's not a necessity. So I'm not going to lose sleep over not having the newest or hottest cartridge or something like that. My recommendation is that you choose some guns you like, have fun with them, and most of all, get out and hunt. That's all for today. I'll catch you next week.